In 2013, Peyton Manning put up the gold standard for quarterback seasons. But what if I told you that 9 years earlier, a quarterback you barely talk about had the best QB season ever? A season so statistically impossible that it broke the NFL record for total yards. A season where he threw 39 touchdowns, completed nearly 70% of his passes, and led the league in passing yards. And he did it while his best receiver, a guy named Randy Moss, missed 30% of the season.
Wow. Hey, I was proud for him. He's redefining how some people are viewing that position. He's a great player.
Daunte Culpepper went full on God mode, destroying every challenge that came his way. He played with a ferocity and focus that scared the hell out of his opponents. He freaking manifested a drive that most people thought was impossible, but was needed to bring the Vikings to a place no one thought was possible. If you think you know the story of 2004 Daunte Culpepper and his mastery of the quarterback position, you probably don't. So let's set the story straight. Facing Daunte in 2004 was absolute madness because this man was driven by vengeance. To understand why Daunte Culpepper played this way in 2004, you need to know what led up to it. But rather than me tell you, it might be easier if I just showed you how we got here. The guy was continually the underdog. He was born in a prison in Miami to a mom serving time for armed robbery. Talk about tough upbringings. He was adopted at 1 day old by a 62-year-old widow named Emma Culpepper, who had already raised 14 other children. He had no fallback and no safety net, so Emma made him tough, and she made him loyal. When the big colleges ignored him, he went to Central Florida and rewrote their record books. When the Vikings drafted him 11th overall, nobody expected him to do well. Except, he did. He became a Pro Bowler by year 2, but the critics never gave him credit. They said anyone could look like a Hall of Famer throwing to Randy Moss and Chris Carter. They said he was just a product of the system. That insult wasn't just about football. It was an insult to everything he had fought through to get there. Coming from where he came from and to make it to the NFL was anything but luck. It was pure hard work, desire, and determination all combined into one. But no one gave him that credit. The only people who seemed to understand his skill were the fans in Minnesota. By 2004, the Vikings had gone more than 40 years without a Super Bowl. They had been to the big game 4 times in the 70s. The Minneapolis Miracle hadn't happened yet. Heartbreak was all they knew. This is a fan base that had learned to expect suffering. But with Daunte Culpepper, they finally had hope. They had a quarterback who looked like a defensive end and threw like a point guard. They believed this was the guy who was finally going to end 40 years of pain. But they were prepared to wait a year because in 2004, Chris Carter was gone. The fans knew that this likely meant that they were in a rebuild year. And the critics knew it too. They said that losing Carter would deeply expose the offense and said that Culpepper couldn't perform without some star receivers. So when Week 1 came around, with the Dallas Cowboys playing at the Metrodome, nobody expected what came next.
Culpepper deep for Kelly Campbell. What a catch! Everybody out. Culpepper throws short on Terrio Smith. Pepper goes left to Marcus Robinson. Touchdown Vikings.
Daunte knew what all the naysayers were shouting, what every one of the analysts thought of him. He has something to prove, so on the very first drive of the season, he did this. He dropped back and hit Ontario Smith on a 63-yard strike for a touchdown. The Metrodome erupted. The Cowboys hadn't even settled in. By halftime, Culpepper had 3 touchdown passes. By the time the fourth quarter arrived, he had 5.
Culpepper deep for Kelly Campbell. What a catch! 5 touchdown passes in the game for Daunte Culpepper.
He threw for 242 yards. He posted a near-perfect passer rating. He scrambled for first downs when the pocket collapsed. He was everywhere all at once. The Cowboys went home having just been introduced to the most dangerous quarterback in football. Final score, Vikings 35, Cowboys 17. In 60 minutes of game time, Daunte Culpepper showed the world that this was not a rebuild year. It was a year the Vikings were going to make a statement. But the real test was still coming. A few weeks into the season, Randy Moss strained his hamstring. He would miss 5 games. This was the moment the critics had been waiting for. This was the moment Daunte Culpepper was supposed to get exposed. Without his Hall of Fame receiver, the offense was supposed to collapse. Without Moss, Culpepper was nothing in the eyes of the critics. But one thing the critics didn't know is that their doubt was the fuel for the fire raging inside of Daunte. Losing Randy for 5 games was just the kind of moment Daunte was looking for in order to prove himself. And the next team that was going to feel the wrath of 2004 Daunte Culpepper would be the Houston Texans. In Week 5 against the Texans, the Vikings trailed in the 4th quarter. The Texans had clawed back to tie the game and bring it to overtime. And in overtime, facing a 3rd and 12 from midfield with no Randy Moss and with the season's early momentum on the line, Culpepper didn't panic. He surveyed the field, stepped up in the pocket, and found Marcus Robinson on a post route for a gain of 34 yards.
Early, but Marcus Robinson is going to end the game with a touchdown.
First down, and the Vikings moved into field goal range. Morton Anderson got the field goal and won it. Culpepper finished that game with 396 yards and 5 touchdowns, without his best weapon, against a defense that had come to play. The very next week in New Orleans, he did it again.
And Daunte was just getting warm. Looking again for Randy. Wow, unbelievable. Quarter Culpepper, again, goes up top to Marcus Robinson. And then Daunte, I'm sure, would do that thing where he rolls his arms. 5 touchdowns.
5 more touchdowns. 425 yards. He was operating at a level that was simply unfair. He was terrorizing his opponents. Defenses had no answer for this guy, partly because they never saw this coming. By this point in the season, he had thrown 15 touchdowns in just 3 games. 15. In the 3 games Moss missed entirely, Culpepper threw for 7 touchdowns and just 1 interception. His passer rating actually went up without Moss on the field. The guy was proving to every single person who ever doubted him that he was the reason this offense worked. Not Randy Moss, not the system, him. But in Week 9 of the season, he had a challenge that almost no man had overcome. It was a Monday night showdown in Indianapolis. Both teams were 5-3, and on the other sideline was Peyton Manning, the man the entire football world had already decided was the best quarterback alive, the MVP frontrunner, and the face of the league. This was Culpepper's audition. He had something more to prove that night. And it wasn't just something to prove to the media or the doubters, but to himself. Because if you could go to Peyton Manning's home turf on a Monday night with the whole world watching and go toe-to-toe with a living legend, then nobody could ever say that you were just a product of Randy Moss ever again. The Vikings fell behind 14-6 at halftime. Manning was carving them up, but Culpepper stayed calm. He was 16 of 19 on the night. He wasn't missing throws. He was just waiting, watching his prey and studying them as if he was a hungry lion. In the 3rd quarter, Nate Burleson returned a punt 91 yards for a touchdown. The score was now tied at 14. The momentum had shifted. Manning answered. Dallas Clark, 4 yards, touchdown, 21-14. It was Culpepper's time to answer.
Culpepper back to throw. First down, sets up, pumps, he throws it upfield, caught by the back, Ontario Smith.
He drove the Vikings 65 yards. Nate Burleson once again caught an 8-yard touchdown pass. And the score became 21-21 with 11 minutes left.
Culpepper takes the snap, looks for the quick throw, throws, caught at the goal line, did he get in? Yes, touchdown.
Then Manning did it again. He drove dozens of yards in 7 plays, then threw to Marcus Pollard for 19 yards and a touchdown. 28-21 with 7 minutes left. But Culpepper answered back. It was one of the most insane back and forths the league had seen in years. Neither man was willing to back down. Culpepper had done everything right. He had matched Peyton Manning throw for throw on a Monday night in Indianapolis. But this was Peyton Manning, and it was his turn to answer. With 2 minutes and 50 seconds left at his own 27-yard line, Manning was completely calm. He hit Edgerrin James for 17 yards. He scrambled for 15. He moved the chains. He burned the clock. He did exactly what he always did. And with 2 seconds left, Mike Vanderjagt hit a 35-yard field goal. It was 31-28. Vikings lost. The doubts about Culpepper's abilities would resurface again. Culpepper finished with a 121 passer rating, 0 turnovers, He did everything right. But Peyton Manning never wasted a 2-minute drill. The message was still sent. Just not the one Culpepper had hoped for. But the most heartbreaking game of the season was still yet to come. Fast forward to Christmas Eve at the Metrodome. 64,000 Vikings fans packed into that dome with everything on the line. The Vikings were 8-7. They needed a win to stay alive in the playoff race. Green Bay was 9-6. This was a must-win. And Daunte Culpepper was absolutely on fire.
3rd down and 5. Culpepper can't find anyone. Now he does, gets a 1st down. Culpepper with plenty of time finds Burleson.
In the second quarter, he threw a 12-yard touchdown to Randy Moss. Then, on the very next Vikings possession, he dropped back and launched a 68-yard bomb to Nate Burleson, who caught it in stride and was gone before anyone could touch him. Then, with 1 minute left in the half, he hit Michael Bennett on a 38-yard strike. 3 touchdowns in 6 minutes. The Metrodome was literally shaking. The Vikings led 21-14 at halftime. But as was the story of the year for the Vikings, the defense couldn't hold. Green Bay came back to tie it and then take the lead. But a little Christmas gift was about to come early for the Vikings. In the fourth quarter, linebacker Chris Claiborne intercepted a Brett Favre pass and returned it for a touchdown. The score stood at 31-24 Vikings. The Metrodome was going insane. Daunte Culpepper had gone into God mode, and key members of the Vikings were following in his lead. The Minnesota fan base was losing their ever-loving minds. They were going to win this game and make the playoffs. But just like the last future Hall of Famer Daunte went up against, Favre was equally as dangerous with just a few minutes left. With about 3.5 minutes on the clock, Favre drove 80 yards in 13 plays. He threw 3 yards to Donald Driver for a touchdown. It became 31-31 with 3.5 minutes left. When the Vikings got the ball back, they ended up going nowhere. Faced with no other choice, they punted. Favre got the ball back at his own 13-yard line with 1 minute and 35 seconds left. It was a tie game on Christmas Eve, with the season on the line, and he drove 76 yards in 95 seconds. The final throw was a 31-yard strike to Javon Walker to the Minnesota 7-yard line. Ryan Longwell hit the 29-yard field goal as time expired. The devastating scoreboard read 34-31 for Green Bay. Culpepper threw for 285 yards and 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. He had a 151 passer rating. That's a perfect game. He played a perfect game on Christmas Eve in front of 64,000 people with the season on the line. He completely outdueled the future Hall of Famer, and Brett Favre stole it from him in the final 95 seconds. Again, the critics pounced. But for anyone who really knew what was going on, they saw the truth. Daunte Culpepper was on the cusp of quarterback mastery, but the rest of his team was the weak link. But the season wasn't over. Despite everything working against him, Culpepper single-handedly dragged the Vikings into the playoffs. And now, he had to turn himself into playoff Daunte. If you thought regular season Daunte Culpepper was a nightmare, playoff Daunte became a whole new beast. In the wildcard round, the Vikings went to Lambeau Field against the Packers. It was below freezing with the wind chill, which just made the setting even more unfriendly for visiting teams. And the Vikings had never beaten the Packers in the playoffs. Not once in franchise history. Every time they had gotten to this moment, the Packers had ended their season. Every single time. Except for today. Because Daunte was a man on a mission, and for this game, the mission was simple. Obliterate Brett Favre. On the very first drive of the game, Culpepper dropped back and hit Mo Williams on a 68-yard touchdown strike. The Vikings hadn't even broken a sweat. 2 possessions later, he found Randy Moss for a 20-yard score, 17-3 after 1 quarter. The Vikings were dismantling Green Bay at Lambeau Field in January. By the time the fourth quarter arrived, the Packers had clawed back to 24-17. And then, Culpepper put it away. He found Randy Moss on a 34-yard touchdown pass. The final score was 31-17. He finished with 284 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 137 passer rating. In the cold in the playoffs, at Lambeau Field no less. For the first time in franchise history, the Vikings had beaten the Packers when it mattered most.
We just came out with a chip on our shoulder, you know. Everybody doubted us. We just kept fighting, keep scratching. We knew we had the talent, we just got to come out and show it.
After 60 years of Vikings fans waiting for something special to happen, that moment meant everything to them. But next up was the Eagles. It was the next test for Daunte, and it was one he was more than willing to take on in order to prove himself. The Eagles were the best team in the NFC. They had gone to the NFC Championship game 3 years in a row and lost each time. And if you ask the experts, this was their year to win it. And while Donovan McNabb was playing nowhere near the Hall of Fame level that Daunte was performing at, McNabb was still playing the best football of his life. Brian Westbrook was also unstoppable, and the Eagles' defense, led by Brian Dawkins and Jevon Kearse, was the most physical unit in football. In a cruel twist of fate this game, the Vikings never found their footing. McNabb drove the Eagles down the field on the opening possession for a touchdown. Then again in the second quarter. It was 14-0. Culpepper punched one in himself on a 7-yard scramble to make it 14-7. And then, on the very next Eagles possession, L.J. Smith fumbled the ball into the end zone and Freddie Mitchell fell on it for a touchdown. It was now 21-7. Just like that, the deficit was back to 14. Culpepper threw for 316 yards that day. He scrambled, he converted fourth downs, he refused to quit. He was still that same man driven by vengeance we saw during Game 1 of the season, but he threw 2 interceptions at critical moments. And more importantly, he was carrying the whole Vikings franchise on his back again. The defense gave up 27 points. The penalties were brutal and controversial, 108 yards worth. And eventually the Vikings lost 14-27. The dream was over. He finished the 2004 season with 4 Pro Bowl selections, 39 touchdown passes, the NFL record for total yards in a single season, 5,123 to be exact, 4,717 passing yards, and 406 rushing yards. He was the most complete quarterback in all of football. A truly unstoppable force and a Hall of Fame worthy performance. So thankfully, he was at least recognized at that year's award ceremony. Scratch that. The MVP award went to Manning. Not to downgrade Manning, but him getting the MVP award that year over Daunte was such a slap in the face. Daunte was doing things nobody his size had ever done, but the Viking defense let him down. It felt like the critics wanted to get the last laugh when they awarded Manning the MVP. Because in 2004, Daunte Culpepper was the best quarterback. Unfortunately, we'll never know what could have been with Daunte Culpepper because the next year, everything unraveled for the Vikings. Moss got traded, they had endless problems and controversy because of the Love Boat scandal, and to top it all off, Daunte got injured badly and was never his former self. We'll never know what could have been if things didn't turn out the way they did, but we do know this. 2004 Daunte Culpepper was the best quarterback ever.